I work as an overnight security officer, Monday through Friday, midnight to 8 a.m. Most nights it's a pretty easy gig. I sit in a chair in a big empty building and watch the camera feeds. I mostly pass the time by watching movies on my laptop and eating a bunch of junk food. On this particular night, my boss called and told me that I had to train a new guard. He hadn't come in yet, and it was already 15 past the hour, so I decided to begin my first patrol. I walked all the floors of the building, checked all the locks and the fire extinguishers. All clear. I made my way back toward my desk. As I got back to the front, I saw a man standing at the front door. As I walked closer, I noticed he had on my company's uniform, so I knew this was the employee I was supposed to train. I opened the door to let him in. I introduced myself and held out my hand to shake. He said, "I'm Gary," but he didn't shake my hand, just uncomfortably looked me up and down. I know some people are weird about germs and such, so I wasn't really offended. I took him to the big desk where we sit and told him where he could put his things. He was really quiet, and he acknowledged everything with a quick head nod. I figured it's his first night, new job, he's probably just nervous. I went right into training mode. I explained to him the job, the post orders, everything that is required during each shift. Still, he didn't talk, just nodded to acknowledge. I did, however, notice that he would constantly rub his hands together. His hands must have been dry because it was loud and annoying. Again, I just thought it to be some kind of nervous tick thing. I took him on patrol, took him to all the floors, stopping to explain what to look out for, which rooms not to go into and such. He nodded and nodded, and I kept talking until we made it back to the front desk. I told him he could relax, have a snack, play on his phone or whatever, just reminded him to keep an eye on the camera feeds. He said nothing, just got up to grab his bag and sat back in the chair. I noticed he had a WWE pin on his backpack. Me being a huge wrestling fan, I thought this was finally a way to break the ice. "Oh, so you like wrestling?" He then smiled really big and responded, "Yeah, me and my girlfriend watch all the time." He then went on to tell me about his girlfriend's favorite wrestlers, her favorite food, favorite games, and so on. At this point, I couldn't get this guy to shut up. I guess this girl is really something special. He goes on more for a few minutes, then asked if I would like to see a picture of her. I said sure. He picked up his phone, scrolled a bit, then pointed the screen toward me. A sick, sinking feeling came over me. "She's really pretty," I told him, trying not to be obvious. "I'm gonna go to the restroom. Keep an eye on the camera feeds, alright?" I got up, as normal as possible, and walked down the hall toward the bathroom. Immediately then, I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. The picture this guy had shown me was of him and a girl, but she was tied up and gagged, and he had his arm around her, holding her up while he took a selfie. I could tell by the look of terror in her eyes that she wasn't there willingly. The police came and took Gary away. They went to his apartment and found a young girl around 17 years old. She had been missing for a few weeks, and her family had been trying desperately to find her. On one hand, I'm still scared at the thought of knowing I was sitting less than 5 feet from a kidnapper. On the other hand, I'm happy to know I helped bring that girl home to her family. I work full-time as a security officer in a beverage warehouse on the overnight shift. My job is to periodically walk the grounds inside and outside and keep an eye on the camera feeds inside the guard shack. The guard shack is outside the warehouse, about 20 feet away. On this Friday night, my shift was going by pretty fast. I only had about 4 hours to go before my weekend started. I was sitting in the guard shack watching a movie when I noticed something on the cameras. There was a woman walking along the outside of the fence that surrounds the property. I thought this was an awful strange time for a woman to be walking outside alone, especially around here. At one point, she looked up at the camera above her and stared at it oddly for a minute. She then crossed to the other side of the street and disappeared from the camera view. It was odd, but I thought that it was nothing to do with me, so I went back to watching the movie. About 30 minutes later, I got up to do my patrol. I walked inside the warehouse for about 30 minutes, then outside for about 15, before I started making my way back. On my way back, I noticed someone standing at the entrance gate. The entrance gate sits directly in front of the shack. As I walked toward the gate, I slowly began to realize this was the woman I had seen earlier on the video feed. I approached the gate and asked, "Can I help you, ma'am?" She said she was an employee that worked in the warehouse and that she had left her jacket inside that had her money and keys. I told her she would have to come back after 8 a.m. That's what time the warehouse would be open. I didn't believe this woman was an employee because all employees, new and old, know about the after-hours policy. Nobody is allowed inside after 11 p.m. unless they have a badge that grants them access, and only the upper management had these badges, none of the warehouse staff. The woman just stood there staring blankly at me. I told her she had to leave the property. Still, she said nothing. I told her she had to leave the property or the police would be called. Then I turned back toward the shack. "Wait!" the woman yelled. I turned around to see her awkwardly rocking back and forth. "Can I use your restroom?" I told her again no one was allowed inside after hours. The woman then stopped rocking, looked me right in the eye, and said, "Get him." I then heard footsteps coming from behind me, but before I could turn, someone grabbed me from behind. They had me in some kind of chokehold. I can tell that this person was significantly bigger than me. All the while this is happening, I hear the woman at the gate yelling for the person to let her in. I felt my body being dragged toward the shack. The grip around my neck got tighter and tighter as I was being pulled away. I felt like I was beginning to lose consciousness. I reached down to my utility belt and grabbed my OC spray. I held it up and sprayed it behind me. I heard a man scream in pain, then the hold around my neck was released. I ran as fast as I could into the guard shack. I heard the woman screaming, "Get him! Don't let him get away!" I got in the shack and slammed the door shut. The door locked automatically. I hit the panic button that was under the desk, which immediately notified police. Through the window, I saw a huge man running toward me. He slammed his body into the door, but thankfully it didn't give. He then began kicking the door extremely hard. I yelled out that the cops were on their way. I heard the woman at the gate shout something at him, but I couldn't make out what she was saying. But the guy stopped kicking and ran toward the entry gate. He climbed up and over, and then the two of them ran off into the darkness. As soon as they were out of sight, I heard the police sirens coming toward me. The cops came and took my statement. I assumed the man had gotten in the same way he got out. The man and the woman were caught not far from the warehouse. They turned out to be a mother and son. I quit my job that same morning. Now I work for an IT company. Best part, I work from the comfort and safety of my own home. I have a part-time job as an overnight guard in a big office building out in the middle of nowhere. My nights are usually pretty quiet. I work on weekends, so the doors are locked up until Monday morning. I have to do a patrol every 2 hours, but since the office is empty on weekends, it was quick and easy. On this particular night, when I arrived at my site, the officer I was relieving told me that the automatic locks on the perimeter doors were malfunctioning. He said occasionally that they would unlock for a couple of minutes, then reset and lock back. The company had been notified and said a tech would be coming in the morning to fix the issue. This was annoying, but it's happened before. It meant that I had to do more patrols than usual. The other officer and I talked for a couple of minutes, then he left. I settled in front of the CCTV and was ready to knock out this shift. I checked all my equipment, read the pass-down log, then got up to start my first patrol of the night. As I was making my rounds, I could hear the locks clicking. Just as my coworker had said, they would unlock for about 2 minutes and then lock back. I finished my patrol and then headed back to my desk. The night went on pretty regularly for the first few hours. I was having a snack at my desk when something on the CCTV caught my attention. In one of the offices on the 3rd floor, the motion lights were coming on. I knew for sure that I was the only one in the building. I grabbed my flashlight and went upstairs to take a look. I opened the door to the office, and by this time the lights were off until I stepped inside when the motion lights came back on. I scanned the room briefly and called out, "Is anyone here?" No response. I saw at one of the desks there were balloons tied to someone's chair. That's the problem there, I said to myself. I untied the balloons and brought them back downstairs. I looked at the CCTV, all clear. I did, however, notice that my backpack that I brought to work with me wasn't in the same place I'd left it. I stared at it oddly for a second before I picked it up. I noticed almost immediately that my tablet was missing, and so was the food that I brought with me. I instantly went to the computer to rewind back the CCTV cameras, but before I could, I saw the motion lights on the screen come on in one of the offices on the 1st floor, the same floor I was on. The camera in this room was a rotating camera. I watched as the camera scanned the room from left to right. At first I saw nothing, just the light on. And then I saw her. In the corner of the office there was a woman, crouched down like some kind of animal in the corner, eating my food. She was a really gross-looking lady. Her hair was very messy, and her clothes looked old and worn. And she was barefoot. I watched as she took handfuls of the food and shoved it into her mouth, the chunks that missed her mouth falling onto the floor. At one point, she noticed the camera as it was turning away from her. When it turned back to her, she was standing in the middle of the office, staring directly at the camera. Before the camera moved away from her, I saw her reach over to the nearest desk and grab a pair of scissors. My heart sank as she made her way toward the office door. In my gut, I knew she was heading right for me. So I grabbed my phone and ran out the front door to my car. I jumped in and locked the door. I watched from my car as the woman came from the hall into the front office where I had been sitting. I ducked down in my seat just enough so that she couldn't see me, but that I could still see her. She lurked around the office for a bit. I could clearly see the scissors in her hand. The woman stayed in the office for a few seconds more. Then she came out the front door and walked toward the woods. I stayed completely still and didn't make a sound until she disappeared into the darkness. The police finally arrived, but the woman was long gone. While reviewing the camera footage, we saw the strange woman come in the front door while I was upstairs checking the 3rd floor. She went through my bag and took my food and tablet, then awkwardly stared at me on the CCTV before going into the office on the 1st floor. Even with the video and my description, this woman was never found. The next day, I asked my supervisor to move me to a different site, and I've never gone back there since.